Welcome back to JavaScript. And as we all know, this is the current phase we are in today's class. So, lucky for us, today would be the last class of JavaScript training. And for this class, we'll be going through some basic coding challenges. That's for JavaScript beginners. So, these challenges are to test your knowledge on how well and how good you understand the language, and it would also increase your logical reasoning on how to approach a problem when trying to solve it with JavaScript. So basically, we'll be having some coding challenges, and they are some beginners challenges, which means that this is actually for beginners and not for intermediate or advanced persons. But we'll get to see one or two intermediate, coding challenges in the midst of all what we have for today. So without wasting time, we'll be going into VS Code and we'll be starting out with our first challenge. So this will be for coding challenges. Okay, so I guess we are all set. So we begin with the first challenge that we have for today. Our first challenge would be to write a function that will take a string and a number, and then gives us.
Oh, hello, sir. Please add some screen. The screen is not now.
Okay, sorry, I did that some days before. Okay, so I guess it's big enough now for us to see. Yeah. So what I'll be doing here is I'll be writing out a function that takes a string and a number, and we'll be getting the nth character of that string. So what this basically means is that if we have a number 4, we'll be getting the fourth character of the string. If we have 3, we'll be getting the third character of the string. If we have 6, we'll be getting the sixth character within that string. Now remember that in JavaScript, indexing starts from 0, and so because of that, we might have to reduce the index the number would have in the function, and you would understand what I mean by that when I begin. So solving this, you begin with your function keyword and you give this a function name. Now it is always better you have a descriptive name, and the name here I could just call this character function. Now I said this function would have two arguments, a string and a number. So I represent the string here, the parameter of, let's say, $ string, and the number here will be $val, which would represent the value. So before I move on, I'll call the function below it, and within this function we just called, we would have an example of the string we want to use, and I would use the word JavaScript. and I would also pass the number we want to use. So I'll use number 5. So what this means is that by adding this number here, we are to return the fifth character within this entire string, and as you can see, that is actually S. It's very simple to do. So I'll begin by creating a variable name. You could actually make use of the parameters here, but I'd actually prefer creating another one. I'll call this $str, and this will be equals to the string itself. Next, I'll declare one for the value. Say let num be equals to $val. And actually, you can declare both of them on the same line if you don't want it this way. So by that I mean you can have let str comma num. You can have them like this. So after doing this, you can go on to initialize them. Okay, so we have two new variable names that hold the parameters here. And so the next thing I would do is to give this a result. I would say let $result, which is the variable name that will hold our outcome. And this would be equals to $str dot char at. Now this char at that we are seeing here is actually a method, and with this method you can find the position of a character within any string. So for this string called JavaScript, we are trying to find the fifth character here, and remember this 5 here will be passed into this $val, and $val here has been assigned to this variable name. So within this method you just put the string num, and as easy as that, you've gotten your answer. So the next thing I'll do is to output the result. Give this an ID of S1. I would say the fifth character in the string is S1 dot inner HTML, and here would output the result itself. So that's how easy this is if you are trying to find a particular character within any any string. But then remember, JavaScript indexing begins from 0. So trying to output the value of S has the index of 4 instead of 5. And because we've defined 5 here, there are two things to do. So you can either lower this index to 4, or if I'm to leave it in 5, I would minus this by 1. So this will be num minus 1. And if I save this now, we should get S as the fifth character within the string. And you can see it, fifth character in the string is S here. So this is just a very simple challenge you could actually solve on your own. And so I hope we all understood how this one goes before we do the next one. Because as we keep on going, we'll get to see more and more advanced challenges. So the second one we have here is one where we'd write a function to compare two numbers. So you write a function to compare two numbers, and these two numbers must be of equal type and equal value. They must be of equal type, equal value, and type. So what this means is that our function here will be making use of two arguments which would represent these two values. So this is also easy to do. So you begin by declaring the function with the function keyword. So I'll call this compare function. And so we'll have two parameters, x and y. To be x, y. So the next thing I'll do, I'll make use of the if statement. Now, if they are the same, it should return true, and if they are not the same, that's the same value and the same type, it should return false. So that means we'd make use of an if else statement. So for this, you know the operators we can use to compare the double equals to and the triple, equality symbol. But then the double equality symbol would only check for the same type and not, we would only check for the same value and not the same type. But the triple equality symbol will check for the same type and the same value. So we'll check if x is equals to y, and we are checking for the same value and the same data type. And so if that is true, we'll return true, or else we return false. As easy as that. Here I would output this. Okay, so we need another ID for this. So here I'll just say the two values are, and here we would have if they are false or if they are true. Okay, so I guess we can't do this, and this is because we have two results, two outputs. So I'll remove this return here. So instead of having return, oh, okay, we could leave it this way. I'll just output the function. And now inside this function, we'll pass in our two values. Now if I should pass in 81 and 81, and I save this, you can see it says the two values are true. And that's because 81 and 81 are the same values and they are the same data type, which means they are data type of numbers. But peradventure, the second 81 here was a string. Let's assume we had this now. This should return false. You can see now we have this to be false, and that's because the triple equality is very strict. So it checks for the value and it checks for the data type. Peradventure we had just double equality sign. This wouldn't be false anymore. It would now become true. And so if I should remove one of the equality symbols here, you would have this to be true even when they are not of the same type. And you can see that now it is true. So what we are checking for is if they're of the same type and values. And so I will add the equality sign back. Now this should give us false. Yes, which is what we have here. So that's that for our second challenge. You can see how easy they are. So we have the third one, and I said as we'll be going on, you'll be getting to see more and more advanced ones. So the third challenge here, surprisingly, is so easy, and this is to take two numbers and sum them up. We are literally taking the addition of two numbers. So this is very easy to do. So we'll be doing this with a function. I'll call this add function. Also give this a parameters for the two numbers, and I would say value 1 and value 2. Very easy. Just declare a variable that would hold our result, and this would be assign the addition of two parameters which represent the values we pass in. And so after this addition, we'll output this with our document dot get element by id to be s3. Okay, so I would say the addition numbers are the addition of the two numbers is the s3 inner html, and here I'll be outputting the results. So I'll call the function and I'll pass in our numbers. I'll just say 24 and 32. This should give us 56. Okay, so the addition of the two numbers is 56. And is this meant to be are or is? Weird. Okay, so that's that for the third challenge we have. We have the fourth one. And the fourth one here says we should write a function to return the type of a value. So we are returning the type of a particular value we are passing in to our function. And that's also easy to do. So this will be type. Here we are returning the type. So a function to return the type of a value. Also easy to do. Function, we'll give this a name, probably just call this type function. And so here we have to return the type of a particular value. So the parameter here will be value, and we have the result should be equals to. Now we'll make use of the type of operator. Although it's not really an operator, it's more or less a keyword, but it's still considered an operator anyway. And so with this type of, and actually return the data type of our value we just passed in. So that's how easy this is. Document or get element by id s4 inner html, and here we'll also pass in our result or call the function outside. So here we'll pass in some series of values. So let's begin with an integer value 45. Okay, we would also need another text to output this. So I would say the type of our value is, and so we would have the data type of the particular value we use when calling the function. For the first value, we have an integer value, which is 45. So going back to our page, you can see that the type of our value is number. So this means that it's of the number data type. Now, if I should change this to a floating point number, and by floating point, I mean that this number is going to have a decimal point. So let's say 45.007. This should still return a number data type. And you can see we still have this to be a number. And so under the number data type, we have the integer and the float, the two ones majorly, and probably some others that might be there. So if I should change this to a string, let's say JavaScript. Now we have a string type. So this has returned a string type for us, and that's because we have a string inside the function we just called. If I should change this also to something else, let's use a boolean. Let me say true. This should also return. Okay, so this actually returned a boolean data type, and that's because the true and the false values are boolean values. So if I change this to false, it should return the same, and it's still boolean. Now we can even pass in an object into this, function. So we just have a brief object here. I would say a assign the value of JavaScript, and this should return an object type. And you can see it gives us an object. Lastly, we can try in an array, but now mind you, for the array it would still return an object also, and that's because an array is an object, but it's a different kind of object. So we can just have some things within the array, still gives us an object. So that's how easy these four we've actually done are. So we'll move on to the next ones. I believe all these were very easy to understand. So we'll gradually move on to more complex ones. And so the next one, which is the fifth challenge, would be for us to write a function that returns the first three characters within any string. Okay, so this would have a function that returns the first three characters in a string. And so this string could be any string. So this means that if irrespective of the fact that we change the string, we should only have just the three characters displaying and not the entire string. Function, give this a name. So I guess I'll just call this three. I don't know, should I call it return three function? So here we'd have our parameter which will represent the string, and I'll just call this any value. Probably I would say x. So we have x now. So here it's also very simple to do. So I would say let the result, I would declare the result on one line. Let's just declare it here. And then I would say the result should be assigned the string we just passed in, which is x. Remember, x here is a parameter which will represent the argument we'll pass in when we are calling the function. Now, if you remember very well, when we learnt about strings, we learnt about something known as the slice method. And so this method is actually used to slice off some particular characters within a string. So we only want to return the first three characters. That's very simple. And because JavaScript indexing begins with 0, this will be 0 for the starting index, which will always be added, and then the ending index would be 3. Now you might be wondering why 3 is there, but this 3 we have here is not going to be added at all. And so what this would give us would be 0, 1, and 2. Remember, the last index will never be added. It will return the index before this last index, but the first index will always be added. So that's how easy this is. Document.get element by id. Okay, so we stopped in s4, so this will have an id of s5. But inner html, and we'll pass in the result. Here we'll call our function, and inside the parentheses we'll pass in the string. So if I should pass in JavaScript, it means that we should only expect JAV to return just these three and not this A script here. So before doing that, let's just quickly have the element to output that. And then for this, I would say the first three characters in the string Uh, and if we go to the browser now, we should only see JAV on the screen, and as you can see, we have the first three characters of the string. So this J has index of 0, A with the index of 1, and V with the index of 2. So this is 0, 1, 2, which is, you know, represents the first three characters. So if I should change this to something else, probably call this community, it would only return COM. And see, that's exactly what we have. No matter how you change it to, it would always return just the three characters in IG. Okay, so that's that for the fifth one. We move on to the sixth. Remember, all these are beginners coding challenges. That's why they look very, very simple. So understanding this would actually help you, you know, better your knowledge on JavaScript and also how to approach some mini problems you might encounter later on. So for the next one, it would be an opposite of this we just finished, and this would be to get the last three characters within a string. So we'll be getting the very last three characters. So I just copy this. So a function that returns the last three characters. This is also easy. Begin with the function name. We'll give this function name. Just call this return last three. So give this a parameter. Let's use y. So I will declare the variable name that will hold our result. And mind you, you can see I'm using the same variable name over and over again, but they will never affect each other because they are within a functions. So within these functions, they are treated as local variables, which means they cannot be accessed outside. So that's why I can actually use the same parameters and the same variable names over and over again. So this will be y dot slice also. And since we want to get the last three, we'll be making use of what we call negative indexing. So to get the last character it would be -1 normally, but we want to get the last three. So the starting index will be -3 and the ending will be 0. So what this means is that it's going to count from the back. So this means that this 0 here will not be added. Rather, what we would have would be, you know, -1, -2, and -3. So the S6 HTML, and give this to our result. So here I'll pass in what we had in the last challenge we did. And so this would also have Nigeria too. So for this, we should only get RIA, which ends the string Nigeria. here I would say the last three characters in the string. Yeah, so now we should have, okay, we don't have it yet. Hmm. Seems like we've not done something right. Okay, yeah, so we have it now. So I guess we shouldn't have added zero, we should have just left it empty. So this is how you can actually get the last three characters within any type of string. So we have RIA for the last three and we have NIG for the first three. So we have the seventh one for today. And the seventh one here would be to get any number of characters from any string. So what this means is that we cannot.
Please, am I the only one Mr. Eliazar? I'm just seeing his face. I can't hear his voice. Am I the only one?
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. It's only you.
Okay,
I
okay,
can hear his voice.
okay. That's better. So I don't
Yeah.
know.
I can hear him too.
Okay, thank you. So I hope he fixes, the whole thing going on. So for the next challenge, it would actually be something similar to what we did in 5 and 6. But here we'll be returning any number of characters that we want. So we'll have a function. Now this one will look a little complex from these two we just did. And this will be a function that returns a specified number of characters. So what this means is that we are not going to hard code this -3 here or this 3 here. No, this would return any number we want in as much as we defined as when calling the function. And so this might look a little different, but it's also the same. So I give this a function name. I'll just call this my function. And so this particular one would need up to three arguments. So the first argument will represent the string, the second will be for the first index, and the third will be for the last index. Or I guess we'll just, okay, yes, we'll probably use the three of them. So for our string, I'll call this $str. Now for the first index, it will be f underscore index. Then for the last index will be l underscore index. So that those are the three parameters we need. So the next thing I'll do, very easy, I'll declare our results. And now I begin initializing. Okay, so this will be $str, which represents the string we'll be passing in, dot slice. Now, the only thing different here is the fact that we are not going to define this with direct numbers. No, we'll be making use of these parameters here. So our starting index, instead of hard coding it with a number, would rather be f underscore index, and here we would have l underscore index. So this f underscore index represents the starting index, and this other one represents the index we are using to end. And so after doing this, give this an ID of s7.inner.html, and this will be equal to dollar sign result. So call my function, and here we'll pass in the string. So I'll use a long string, something like metropolitans, and our first index, find that to be 3, and the last index would be 8. So I'll say characters in the string, since we defined a particular set of characters to print out and not everything. Okay, so before I move on to the browser, let's just quickly check this out. So the M here has index of 0, E with the index of 1, T with the index of 2, R with the index of 3. So that means it would actually begin here. So this is 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So always remember the last index will never be added. So this means we should get ROPOL on the screen. So let's see. And that's exactly what we have here, ROPOL. So within the where we call the function, we can change this last index to another thing, let's say 10, and this should have ROPLIT, roplet. If you check the browser, okay, I've not saved this yet. You can see we have it to be this way. Although we still had to, hard code all this, but now we are not hard coding it within the function. We are doing this when calling the function. So I can also change the starting index to 1. This will begin from E. And if I should change this to 0, it will begin from the very first character, which is M. So you see, so that's how easy this is. I'll just change this to 3 and 8. Okay, so far so good. I would say we've been doing the easy ones, getting to more complex ones very soon. So now the next one we have is a little complex, and so for this challenge, we would actually be writing a function that will return. This is to return half of an entire string. Yes. So this particular one would only return half of the string and not the full string. Will return just half of the string. So of any length we have, if we have 20 string, we expect just 10 characters to show. If we have 13, we expect just 6. 13, 12 would give us 6. So this is also easy to do. Function, now just call this half function. Obviously, we'd have our first parameter, which is for the string itself. Well, for this one, we will not have the index in here. We'll define the index in our function. So let's just begin with that. So I'll initialize what and what we need. So we need a first index and we need a last underscore
Yes, sir.
index. Yes. Okay, so if we have anything, we could just say it while I'm doing this. So the next thing I'll also declare would be the result that would hold it. But before declaring the result, now we would need to add some kind of logic to make this code work. And so in order to get half of an entire string, it's very simple. Actually, it's very simple. But before I start typing out the code, I want us to get the logic of how I will do that. So it's very easy to do. So getting the half of the string would basically mean we need to get the length of the entire string first of all. Now when we get the length of the entire string, we'll divide it by two. Dividing it by two actually would represent them in a kind of half form. When you divide something by two, you would have one here and one on the other side. So after we divide it by two, whatever we get as the result will represent the last index, and then our first index would be initialized as 0. So this is basically what I mean. I would also declare a string that will hold the length. So I'll call it str underscore len. This is for the length. And lastly, I'll declare our results. So this result here would hold you know, the final output. The first thing I'll do is to get the length of the entire string. It will be string length, which will be equals to str dot length. So we now have the string length. So in order to make sure we actually have this length, we can check it out by saying document dot write, say string underscore length. Let us just test it with an actual. We can test it with a string itself. So let's assume I use the word metropolitan. If we go back to our browser now, you can see that the length of this string is 13. So this means that this string has 13 characters. So that means our variable actually works and it holds that value. So we've only just solved one problem from the entire problem we have. So let's continue and solve the rest. So after getting the string length, this string length now will be needed to be divided into two in order for us to get a particular value, and that value would be for the last index. So I begin with the first index, and the first index will be initialized as 0. Now for the last index, this would be the string length divided by 2. Now you might be wondering why we divided by 2 and not any other number. And this is because dividing by 2 will give us equal halves of the entire string. But if it is a string of an odd number, it would only give us the whole number. It would not round it up. It will only give us the integer part of the string. So now we have our first index and our last index. So the next thing we have is our result. Result here will be equals to, now we'll pass in the entire string, which is str dot slice. Here we would have the first underscore index and our last index also index. So output this, probably just call this S8 dot inner HTML, and this will be equals to results. So I'll say the first half of the string is, so if we go back now, we should see the first half of the string. Okay, and where did I get it wrong? Okay, so this wasn't expected, but let's just quickly look at everything properly. So the first
You,
thing,
you can also use it for the show.
okay, because I'm sure I didn't repeat a function name. This is definitely new. Okay, so this is what I'm going to do. This particular variable holds the length, and f index here is 0, which is correct. Okay, so what I'll do is I'll just comment this out for now, and I'll see if this gives us something. I'll print out the L underscore index. Let's be sure it gives us something. Okay, it gives us 6.5. So I hope this decimal point isn't the reason why. It probably might be. And so because of that, I'll take this off to truncate the decimal, or we can round it up, whichever one. So the new index here, I'll call this final underscore L underscore index. This would be math. We use a math function, but round. This should round our L underscore index. So before then, let me just test this if it works. Okay, and now it has rounded 6.5 to 7. So that now is 7. Okay. Okay, so the result here will be string str dot slice f index, and this would rather be underscore index. So this is the same as saying 0 comma 7, because the final index here represents 0, and this new index we are using for our final index represents 7. So this should probably work now. I hope it's not the semicolon. Could be. Yeah.
No, you use F index. So you put final index again. I think it should be F index instead of final index.
Okay. Okay. This is actually F index, which represents the our first index, but this is final underscore L underscore index, which is for our final last index since we rounded it up to 7. I expect this to work and I do not know why. Let's just check the console and see. Okay, and we have a message here. It says cannot set properties of null in our HTML. Okay, and this is in 75. Okay, so I don't know why this is. But anyway, I'll make use of the return statement instead. I'll return result. Okay, you know what? Let me even make use of the document or write. Let's see if that works. This actually works. We've actually gotten half of the entire word. So I'm surprised why the other one we are used to didn't work, but no problem. I'll return this instead. Okay. At the end there would be document or get element by ID. This would be S8. Okay. Oh, okay. The error was from me. No problem. This is actually meant to be S8 and not S7. That was why. Okay, so that means it's actually just go back to the way we had it before. This should work fine. Yes. Okay, so it works. So now we have half of the entire metropolitan string. And because the entire string is an odd number, we had to raise it up. So let's assume we had that to be an even digit. We wouldn't need to do
Oh,
that.
hello, sir.
Yes. Yeah, yeah. And here you, what word can we try?
Yeah, I
Martini.
want to ask if we were to put that document does get element by ID outside the braces. So
Mm-hmm.
how will that brace be?
Okay, so I'll show you how that is. So let's use a word like compensate. I think compensate is actually a 10 character string. Yes, it's 10. So this should give us exactly half, which should end in E. So you can see we have COMPE. So that's a function that will give you half of a string. So let me just quickly show, okay, let me quickly show you guys how we could do it if we want the document get element by ID to be outside. Now, if you want that to be, all you need to do is here would instead of having it here, we'll have this to be return. So this will be outside. So this rather will be return result. So this is how you would have it. So what we would call here would be the function that's assigned to this document or get element by ID. Return our function and we would also pass in the string that we want to return. So I said for the In character string, we use compensate, and they should give us half of the string. So you can see the result is still the same. Now we can get the last half too, and that's actually easy to do. So what I'll do here, let's see, and I don't think anything would run after this return statement. So we'd have to do that inside, or we could do that in a separate function. Okay, so you know what? Let me just take this to the way it was before. Okay, yeah, so we have this like this. So here we are printing, you know, half. That's the first half of the string. So I would say the first half for the first half. So for the second half here would be the result here, or let's just say result 2, and we'd have to declare this somewhere else. So yeah, I'll say $ result 2. Now this would be equals to the string dot slice. Now you can guess what this would be. So here our last index rather would be the first index. So where we have final this final underscore L index as last index, here it would be the first index, and what we have here would be empty because it will start from this index and print it to the end. So next thing I'll do is to, you know, document dot get element id. Now give this an id of s9. HTML, and this will be equals to result 2. So we should have the first and the second half. And because I want this to be together, we'll have another span tag that will be close to this tag. So we have two span tags here. This would be S9. Now I would say the first half and the second half of the string. And so this should give us the first and the second half. Okay, it only gives us oh, this is S capital, meant to be small. I hope I'm correct. Okay, I think I am. Okay, so you can see we have the entire word compensate. It's actually joined together, and that's because in HTML the span tags are inline elements and they only take up the space that they require. So I'm guessing that's why it puts the two of them together. So I'll create a space to show that this is the first half and that's the other half. I think an NB. Okay, doesn't. Hope this works. Just giving it a space.
I think it's NDF.
Yes, it's NBSK I was trying, but don't worry, we have a space now. Yes. So this is the first half and this is the last half. So this is how you can get the two halves of any string, a string of any length. We can even have the entire alphabet here and it will still give us half of everything. This will give off half. So on one side we would have 13 characters. Yes. So this is the first half and this is the second half. So that's how easy these challenges are. Anyway, they are beginner challenges, so it's expected to be
Sir, we need the
easy.
code of this class. So
Okay. Yeah. So I know we are almost approaching the time we are meant to end, and we still have like two more to go. Yes, we have two more. So the next challenge will be to check if a number is an even number. Yes, so that's the next one. So that will be number 9, our second to last challenge. This will be to write a function. I'll just say a function to check for even numbers. So this means if it's an even number, we should get true. If it's an odd number, we should get false. Or we could tell the user you gave us an odd number. Okay, so before then, I would just like to give this some spacing. Okay, yes, I think that's better. Okay, so a function to check for even numbers. This will be function. Call this even function. And now we would have to get a logic of how this would work. So before I begin, remember that even numbers are numbers that when you divide them by 2, you don't have a remainder. So this means when you divide any even number by the value of 2, it gives you a whole number without a remainder. So we'd have the parameter of x, which is where we'll pass this number. And now we'll check this using the if statement. And would have an if else in the event that it turns out not to be an even number. So this will be if x. Now I'm going to use an operator we probably have never used, but I remember teaching this operator, and it is known as the modulus operator. It's represented with the percentage symbol, that's this symbol. And what this operator does is that it does a division and returns a remainder. Mhm. So the first thing we do here would perform that, and I would say x by 2. In fact, okay, I'm going to declare our results here. So I would say dollar sign results would be equals to parameter x, then modulus 2. So this means that whatever our result is, this result variable name will hold it. Now we'll check this. Is the result the same as 0? Of course, if the result here is 0, it means that it is an even number. So, and if that is true, we'll return the boolean true. Or else, if it's an odd number, we return false. So that's how easy this is. And that's all. All what you just need to do is document dot get element by id, and you know I'm using this because we have return statements here. I'll give this an id of s10 dot inner html, and so we would output our results here, or rather we would output the function. I said results, the function, and here we'll pass in our number. So let's assume we use the number 24. Obviously that is an even number. Before then, let's have where we would output this. So I will say number, or I just begin with asking a question. Is the number an even digit? This should return the value of true or false depending on what value we pass in. So you can see, is the number an even digit? It gives us the value of true, and that's because, going back to our code, you have this to be 24. 24 is passed into the parameter of x. X modulus 2 will give us 0 because there's no remainder. 24 divided by 2 is 12, remainder 0. And because the result here will hold 0, and here we are basically saying is 0 equals to 0, it will return true. Even if we give this a strict comparison by giving it the third equality sign, it should still give us true. It still gives us true. But if I change this to 27, which is an odd number, should get false. And you can see now we have false. So this is how we can check if it's an even number or if it's an odd number. And so peradventure I wanted to test for odd numbers. All I just need to do is change this to not equals to 0. Now if I should change this to not equals to with this sign, this will return true because it's actually true that our result here is not equals to 0. It has a remainder. If I go back now, we should see true, and you can see we have true. But we are checking if it's an even number, so let's just leave it that way. And if I change this to 12, it should give us true. Which is true. Okay, so we're approaching the end, and the last one. Okay,
Can we, is there a way in which we can start the solution without declaring met results? Like, we just start with if x equal to 2, like that.
okay, yeah, you can start like that, but I decided to break it down for
Okay,
simplicity. Yeah, so you can
okay,
begin
sir. Okay, okay.
that way. So the last one we have, let's see, and what is it? Wow. So the last one here is to return the average of numbers in an array. Wow, so this might probably be the most technical one. Function that returns the average number in an array. Okay, so first of all, begin with the function keyword. I give this array function. Now, because of time, I'll be calling this function here and I'll be passing in what we need. So within this function, we need an array, and I'll just say 2, 3, 4, 5. So that's for numbers. So the next thing we'll do here is we'll first of all think of the logic of how this would work. And so in order to get the average of an array, we need to get the length of the entire array first of all. Now, second, we'll get the sum of all the numbers in the array. So that means we would have a sum of them. And now, finally, when we do that, to get the average would be a division of the sum with the length. So that will be sum over the length, and that will give us the average of this array. So this means we will be needing, okay, aside from our x parameter, which will hold the array, I'll be needing the result. This will be to always hold our final result. I will need one for the to define length of the array. So I'll call this array underscore length. We'll define it here. We'll declare it here. We also need an array that will hold the sum. I'll call this sum. So far, I think that's enough of what we need, and I think we can move on. So the next thing I'll do here is to initialize our sum. I'd say sum is equals to 0. It's just 0. We have to initialize it because if we don't do this and we try to, add something else into the um, variable, it won't work. So next we'll be looping through this array. And so I would say for this, we'll do this. Now remember we learned the for loop in object and array. And so for the array, we use the for of loop. Now you're not using the normal for loop, we are using the for of loop. So this will be, we'll call our variable here y, and this y here will represent the elements within our array. So this will be y of x. Remember this x here is our parameter which represents the entire array. And this y we have here is representing the elements within that array. So I'll probably declare it here also. I'll say let y. So that's it. So now within our for loop, we'll be getting the sum. And so for the sum here, I would say $sum will be plus equals to y. Now what this is doing is it is performing the addition assignment operation. So this means that as it loops through the elements of the array, it's adding every element into the sum. So this is almost like saying sum equals to sum plus y. That's the equivalent of this that we have here. So that's exactly what we are doing. So to be sure if this is working, let's just test it out with document.write. If I print out the sum now, we should have the sum of all these numbers we have here. Okay, so that was not what I was expecting. Okay, so how come that gives us 2519? Wow, that's very complicated. It is 259 half. Okay. So I get this now. This actually gave us the addition as it kept adding. So the last number here is 14, and this represents the final addition, but we don't want that. We only need 14. We don't need the entire um you know addition. So I'll be trying this outside the for loop, and we should have something different. Yes, so we have 14. So this means that our code is actually working fine. So the sum here in this for loop it holds the value of 14. So now that we have the sum, the next thing we do is to get the length of the array. So I would say array, already defined that with array length. and this will be assigned the length of the entire array. So this would be x dot length. We could also test this out, and our result here should be 4. And you can see we have 4 here. So this means that both our sum and our length are working. So the next thing we do, you know, get the average of the entire array, which our result would hold. So this will be result equals to the sum divided by the array length. And here we'll return the result. So I guess that's that. Now I would use a document or get element by ID to be s11 dot inner html. This will be assigned our function.
This very sometimes the ID on the ID one corner, I feel say you know, are you not agba for this thing? Complete that.
Simon na boss now. Simon na
Senior
boss.
Okay.
When you guys are done whining, you will stop. Yeah.
Yeah,
Someone
so
else
You don't finish the whine, you will stop.
the average
Okay. You don't finish already now. The only
the
thing you have
average
to
of
do is
the
just to
array.
remove the fact that it's showing 2 5. So the function only returns the.
Okay, so the average of this array is 3.5. So I'm sure we got that by dividing 14 by 4. So if I should increase the numbers here to as much as anything I want, this will probably give us a very complex number, but nevertheless to be a float. Yes. So this is how you can get the average of an entire array. So this brings us to the end of this coding challenge. I know we've definitely understood one or two things now. And mind you, these are just beginner challenges. So normally I would hope that we all practice this, try this out, and even solve more of them, as they would help strengthen our JavaScript script skill set, and they would also increase our logical reasoning on how to actually approach problems in JavaScript. So thank you, and I hope you all try this out.